that, of course, this project comes to pass. Of course, just of recent, the president of this country has just signed a memorandum of understanding, of course, with Tanzania. And of course, the reason of that MOU is to make sure that this project pipeline comes to reality. And to help us, of course, digest more of these ideas is the Public and Corporates Manager, Mr. Mulisa Peter, of course, from not any other company, but from the Uganda National Oil Company. Mr. Mulisa, it's a pleasure and thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Smart TV, for having us. And good afternoon to the viewers. My name is Peter Mulisa. I'm responsible for legal and corporate affairs at Uganda National Oil Company.
What do you make of this event?
Well, it's an excellent event, and I think the timing couldn't have been better. 2 months after we took FID, we announced FID, Final Investment Decision. We are now gathering all Ugandan companies and entities and international companies that are interested in supplying supplying services and goods to oil and gas. And we are talking about one thing: how do we retain value in Uganda? How do we get Ugandans to participate? How do we ensure that national content becomes a reality? And I think we've had very excellent presentations this morning. We've had the minister give us policy direction on where the country wants to go. It's our duty to implement what the government intends to achieve, and we will implement it and we will get it done. And what the minister has charged us is to ensure that in the investment that is going to happen in the next 4 years, which is the investment under Tirenga and Kingfisher, where the 2 projects that will produce oil and gas, as well as the East African crude oil pipeline, which will transport the crude oil to the coast in Tanzania, that we aim at the very least to getting at least 40% of the contracts and the value retained by local companies, by Ugandan companies. And that basically means that Uganda National Oil Company, working with our partners, Total and Sinuk, as well as ECOP, will structure and continue to work on our contracting processes and strategies to push Ugandans up in participation. We'll continue to do stakeholder engagement, training, engagement to inform people using all sorts of media, including one like this, working with the partners like Smart TV and others, to inform Ugandans and encourage Ugandans to participate in the sector. We are so far encouraged that many Ugandan companies are getting contracts, and many Ugandan companies are registered and are building capacity, are getting ready to participate. So we are encouraged, and we believe that at the end of the 4 years, we should be able to retain a significant sum of value from the 11 billion that is going to be invested in the 3 projects.
You are a legal expert. This kind of project comes at a time when probably we don't have bills like the local content bill. I don't know where does this leave such a huge project like this, on extent that we are battling, we are emphasizing on a very huge project, but we don't have bills like the local content bill, which would be a facilitator to the progress of this project.
So I would like to say that oil and gas sort of moved ahead of national content development in other sectors in the country. So the oil and gas actually has a law on national content that was enacted in 2013. 2 laws actually, if I may say. The upstream law and the midstream law that were enacted in 2013 have clear provisions on priority of Ugandans in contracting. So there is a very detailed provisions in both laws, followed by detailed regulations that are effective as well. So it's actually true that for oil and gas we have a law that mandates licensees like UNOC, like Total, like Sinuk, like ECOP to give priority to Ugandans in the procurement and provision of services and goods. And there are even numbers, percentages on employment, what percentage of Ugandans should be in management, in mid-level management, in technical service, technical level of employment. All these are listed in the law. and the law is being strictly regulated and followed by the parties. So we hope that we have created enough traction for other sectors in the economy to follow suit and equally give priority to Ugandans, even before the general national content law is put in place. Yes.
So it's now 2 months down the road ever since the final agreement was done. You talked about many people that have come on board in terms of making contracts. If you don't mind, if you could share with us maybe some of those few companies that have come on board to see to it that they benefit out of this project.
Yes, several. In the presentation, I believe, made by the Executive Director of Petroleum Authority of Uganda just a few minutes ago, he listed them, and there are quite many. But suffice to mention maybe a few. Excel Engineering is leading Excel Engineering and Kaga are leading the civil works work for Sinuk. They were contracted a significant sum of money in the contract. We have several companies that are working in Visa on the central processing facility area that have done early works, civil works, that are doing the construction of the camp. But most of the earthworks have been done, civil works have been done by Ugandan companies. And that is just in those 2 projects that are moving ahead. ECOP has several Ugandan companies that have been employed in different areas. And so, I mean, it's many Ugandan companies are involved. I think on the list that we had today, we had no less than 30 Ugandan companies deployed. In Iblis at the CPF facility, I remember I found 6 Ugandan companies working. And so we are pleased that even at this stage, 2 months after final investment decisions, we can talk of more than 30 Ugandan companies that are involved. We can talk of a significant portion of the contracts that have been awarded going to Ugandan companies. And we believe at the next level of contracting is even going to accommodate more Ugandan companies because it is lower and smaller. So we are optimistic that we are going to have many Ugandan companies participate down the lane, and that we are going to have a significant retention of the investment in Uganda.
Maybe last but not least, attitude and perception is very key, especially if you're managing such a very huge project. To what extent are you convinced that the public has really understood the concept of the project that we are talking about this afternoon?
I'm not highly confident, I should say, that the public as a whole has understood what we are doing. There are pockets of people who have really understood and have formed companies, have formed joint ventures, and they are benefiting as we see them. But there are also many people who are now coming on board, who are suddenly realizing that this project is real, it's happening, and the money is being spent, and are coming on board. But when we look at the national suppliers database, we see many Ugandan companies registered, which is very encouraging, that many have taken the step to register. What we need to see then is now them coming off the register onto the contracting list. And that's the part that we want to encourage. But we also want more Ugandans to come on board to participate. What we've done as UNOC and together with our colleagues in PAU has been to now go to the Graben, to the community itself, and get all the businesses at the community level to be registered on the National Supplier Database. The results were fantastic. That we had companies, we had community groups, we had individual consultancies, all registered by our teams. We stationed our teams there, they registered the people, they educated the people on how to participate. We are working with the local governments to ensure that communities at the grassroots level as well participate. And we believe that this will deliver so much value. But of course, we have segments of our society that haven't understood that oil and gas is here, it is for everyone, and they are still sitting on the fence. I think we can't sit on the fence for much longer because the project is rolling on. So we need to get all these people sitting on the fence to get off and get into project execution, into project participation mode. The only way to do it is to partner with entities like yours so that we communicate. We are working with civil society. It reaches certain segments of the population that we can't reach. We are working with all partnerships that we can have to ensure that people are informed. But I just want to say this, and I've said it probably many times, that for an ordinary Ugandan, the benefit from oil and gas is now. It is through participation in contracts, getting awarded a contract to supply anything that you're doing, or able to provide, and that's what will bring money directly into your pocket or your bank account, let me say. The government revenue that will come out of selling the petroleum products that will be, rather crude oil that will be produced, will not bring money directly into your bank account or your pocket. Because that money will go into the petroleum fund. It will be used for all our common goods. So the government will build a road, yes. That does not bring money directly into my pocket. But if I go now and I supply a service, say accounting, I supply food, I supply products, I supply labor, I get money paid directly into my account, and then I can build value from that money. And so I encourage Ugandans to absolutely come out now and participate.
So how huge is this project? You have convinced Ugandans that this is one of the hugest projects Uganda has ever had. So how big or how huge this project is?
It's actually not one of. It's the biggest since independence. It's one investment in 4 years of $11 billion, followed by a refinery project that will cost us about $3.5 billion. So when you add it all together, it's about $16 billion. And that's the biggest project we've had in this country. And that presents an opportunity that we have not had as a country in terms of participating in an investment in a project since independence. That's a fantastic. It's an amazing. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and that's why everyone needs to come out and participate.
Where there's a good, there's also a bad. What are your worries as UNOC, especially in the process as we go through the process of preparing for such a huge project?
Yeah. Now, our worries are few, because we've really done all that is possible to prepare and mitigate any concerns for the project. And so we are not very much worried about the implementation of the project, the cost of the project, the relationship between the project and our biodiversity, our community being resettled properly and gaining value from the project. We are not worried about such things. What we worry about right now is whether Ugandans are actually going to come out, stand to be counted, participate and partake from the project and retain a significant sum of money of the investment in country. Because you see, when this money remains in the country, if out of the 11, for example's sake, we retained 4 billion, that 4 billion will be in this country, it will be reinvested in this country, it will multiply. And that's how economies grow. It will create jobs. It will create supply chains. And that's what we want. So that money sits here and begins to multiply. And when the crude oil starts flowing and we are selling, government gets revenue. It injects in the economy as well. And our economy will grow, and probably our GDP can even more than double, because you have money that is in the economy that is growing. You're building capital bases for our people, and that's what this project should be able to do for this country. So our biggest concern, what we're working on day and night, is how to ensure that that multiplication effect, multiplier effect, actually happens.
So the final fundamental question is, what must I have as a business person to embrace and also tap into the opportunities that come as a result of this huge project?
The key thing is, do you have a service that you're providing today? Do you have goods that you're providing today? If your answer is yes, then register on the National Supplier Database. The projects require all services, all goods. So you don't need to move from whatever you're providing to create a new business line, because we need all services. So just register and look out for the opportunity, put in your bid properly, study what is required to meet the standards of oil and gas. We are there to help you. There are very many entities that are there to help, and come and participate. And you will win the tenders, and you will start to work, and you will start to earn. And that's what we encourage people to do. If you do not have a running business right now, but you have an idea, register that idea into a business and develop partnerships, develop JVs, and come and participate.
Your final parting shots, Mr. Mulisa Peter.
The project is here. $11 billion is going to be spent in the next 4 years, and we have a great opportunity. Let's take it.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to us. Mr. Mulisa Peter, of course, he's in charge of legal affairs at the Uganda National Oil Company. Now, the honor and the opportunity is for you, the business community, of course, to tap into this huge project, which I personally believe it's one of those huge projects that is going to bring development, of course, both in terms of creation of employment opportunity, but also one of the key driving forces that will make sure that maybe the Vision 2040 that most Ugandans have talked about will come to reality. Of course, we will still continue to give you more updates of what will be happening. This is a two-day conference. It started today. It will still be here even tomorrow to discuss matters of oil in Uganda.
The oil and gas sector. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Betty. Betty is still a panelist for the coming sessions, but she'll be seated over here. So during the conversation, if there's any question that you have for her regarding that project or anything else in the national content conversation at POW, she's over here and will be part of the next conversation. I would now like to ask the panelists I spoke about, the moderators, Tony and Michael, to please come. For the rest of us, I really hope that you have been to the exhibitors. I see that the rice and the potatoes and chapati might take its toll with regards to keeping you awake. So this might be a small challenge, but luckily for you, I was visiting. I was up there in the morning, and I saw that there's an authentic Ugandan coffee business that is there. You should go get a coffee to keep you awake. Or it's 100% Ugandan owned. I didn't know this. You should try. I think it's called Imara or something. Yeah, check it out. They're the only coffee place there up there. They're the only ones. Tony, Michael, please. They will introduce their panel members and continue with the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. A very good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to this afternoon session. My colleague Tony and I have the pleasure this afternoon of moderating a panel of distinguished guests who will introduce just now. The first guest on the panel is Mr. Alex Mbonye, who is the local content manager at Kamod Beta. Alex, you're welcome. Our next panelist is Mr. Ronnie Musoke, who is a fund manager at ICOUG. Welcome, Ronnie. We also have with us Ms. Veronica Mawanda, who is the tax manager, oil and gas at PwC. I'll now ask Tony to introduce the rest of the panelists.
Okay, and on my side, I'll have Betty Namubiru come back. Oh, okay. So Bettina, it's okay. You can stay down there. I'll have Mr. Agri Ashaba. Now, Mr. Agri Ashaba is the General Manager, GCC. He carries with him 19 years experience in business development, setup, marketing and growth, ideas, and advisory. He's also led a number of setup and strategic engagements in education, transport, public sector, retail, and energy and oil and gas. Agri, like I mentioned before, is the General Manager, GCC Services, a leading camp management services provider in Africa and the Middle East. And Agri is also the current General Secretary of the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. With Agri, we shall also have Mr. Andrew Othieno. We were debating whether it's Otieno or Othieno. So I am glad to say it is Othieno. And Mr. Andrew Othieno is the Manager Standards Department at UNBS. He is also responsible for the design, development, implementation of programs for development and harmonization and publication of national standards. For 14 years experience in national and international regulatory verification, and he's done this for quite some time. And he'll be telling us about the ISO standard certifications and any of those certifications that we have thought or we have been thinking are elusive but very important for our businesses. And finally, on the panel, we'll have Mr. Robert Gensi. So Robert Gensi is a farmer. When we were debating and fighting over the presentations, he was saying, you know, farmers don't just do presentations, they have to show how things are done. Robert Gensi is currently the Global Agriculture Advisor for Self-Help Africa, supporting programs in Eritrea, Kenya, Ethiopia, Malawi, Uganda, and Zambia. He offers technical backstopping to country strategic interventions, supporting efforts that build smallholder farming households into resilient households. He has experience as well in humanitarian assistance and also experience in value chain analysis, monitoring, and evaluation. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Before we begin, I would just like to encourage everyone, as the panelists are speaking, please write down any questions that you might have. And at the end of the session, everyone will have an opportunity to ask the panelists questions. So I think without any further delay, I think we can get right into the panel discussion. And I'll start with Mr. Alex Mbonye, the local content manager at Camod Beta. Alex, Camod is one of the major local content providers currently working in the oil and gas industry today, working in Tilenga. The title for this panel discussion is Experiences and Lessons So Far. So it would be helpful if you would just walk us through some of the experiences that you've had working in Tilenga, maybe give us a little bit of background about the scope of the work that you're doing, any challenges that you've faced, and proposals to overcome any challenges. Alex?
Thank you, Michael. Following the long-awaited FID and the Tilenga project kickoff, Camod Beta JV, which is a joint venture between Camod Fabrication Technologies Kenya and Beta Projects Uganda, was one of the first companies to be awarded a Tier 2 contract. This is, of course, through McDermott, and to build the camp, 3,910-man camp, within 13 months. So this was quite a momentous occasion. We really had to step up, and we've had to mobilize our consortium members, suppliers, to align and deliver on this contract. And so far, it's a steep learning curve, but we believe we're on the right trajectory with all the stakeholders involved, not only our client, but also our community where we're working. We realize the responsibility in terms of local content, retaining the value. We have to actually ensure that as much as possible, we have our local suppliers benefit as much as possible from this project. We have over 20 suppliers of various materials, services, and a few months down the road, we've been able to actually increase our spend to several billion, and they are working well with us. We have until the end of the year to make sure that this project is delivered. And I would say that it's been a very interesting journey so far in such a short time to step up to the quality required, the standard, deliver this project to the oil and gas standard that is expected. And we have matched basically Ugandan talent, Ugandan capital as well, with Turkish manufacturing technology, and in a real proper JV to deliver on this project. And so far, we are doing quite well. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. I'm sure the audience will have several questions regarding what you've submitted, your experiences working in Telenga. Moving on to Mr. Ronnie Musoke. Ronnie, we started by seeing a video from the UIA highlighting how insurance is a vital piece of the oil and gas industry going forward. Large opportunities on the asset side, on the project side, on the people side with Workman. So talk us through some of the opportunities that you see in the insurance space and maybe some challenges that you've faced so far and how you propose we could overcome any challenges.
Thank you very much. First of all, for the opportunity to be able to share some experiences with the audience. But let me start by thanking the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum for yet again pulling off another conference under the circumstances. It has been very organized, and I think we commend you for that. I would also like to thank the Petroleum Authority of Uganda for endorsing the Insurance Consortium for Oil and Gas. This I have to mention because this consortium was launched in 2018 during a similar conference in Munyonyo. So ever since then, the discussion around the level of preparedness was to see what kind of capacity we have in terms of financial and human resource. But following the announcement of FID on the 1st of February, we now moved from level of preparedness to now demonstrating what capacity we will have available to be able to write oil and gas business. So just to give you a brief about the consortium and how it falls into the scope of national content. The consortium comprises 18 members, 18 insurance companies. And all these insurance companies are licensed by the Insurance Regulatory Authority of Uganda and therefore authorized to write business in Uganda. And by being incorporated in Uganda, that alone qualifies for being a local company. So we can confirm that all the players in the oil and gas space in the insurance sector are actually local, going by the definition, by the qualification of being incorporated. So what we're looking at in terms of national content is, first of all, I'll just subdivide this in 4 areas. One, we're looking at labor. Now, on the side of labor, all the insurance companies who are going to participate in the oil and gas space have identified key personnel who are going to be trained. Some have already been trained actually, and the training is still ongoing. And this is a person who will be specifically handling oil and gas activities. All these persons, I could say, probably 90% of them are actually Ugandans. So with that, we pride ourselves in demonstrating yet again that national content is being observed here. And also the skilling of these personnel means that they'll also go on skilling others at lower levels and thereby creating a pool of skilled workers in the insurance sector. On the side of capacity building, here we're looking at stakeholders who are now outside our activities as insurers. We're looking at contractors. We're looking at the communities where these activities will be taking place. We're looking at all other stakeholders who are involved in oil and gas. And what we're doing here is to make sure that they understand our business, they understand the terminologies, they understand the claims procedure, to make sure that in case of any claim, they are at least mindful of the processes that we go through as a sector. And that way we believe that they'll get to, we'll be moving together in a seamless way as we're all participating in the oil and gas space. Health facilities, we're aware that the nature of work which is going to be conducted, or which is even already being conducted, can result in injuries. So the intention is to work closely with the health facilities. They may need to be equipped with better medical facilities, medical equipment, drugs, and the like. So part of our agenda as an industry is to make sure that we work closely with them and make sure that in case of any injuries in the fields or even other areas not related to, not close to the oil fields, that they are able to address the injuries as and when they come up. So this is something that we've also earmarked to do. We will also be participating in the area of research, development, and innovation. And here we're mainly looking at IT. And the whole idea is to make sure that we simplify the way business will be conducted. We've developed apps. We've come up with IT platforms for conducting business. And the whole idea is for anyone who cannot access us easily, they can be able to do so through these platforms. This we can really demonstrate with the motor third-party platform, and also I think the marine platform as well, which has been rolled out. On the goods and services side, we can confirm that all of us, as already indicated, that we're all local players. All the purchases are purchased in country. Very little of this is actually picked from out of the country. Here we're looking at stationery, we're looking at furniture, we're looking at IT equipment. All these are purchased from local service providers, and thereby enabling them to get some revenue, and also ultimately government also benefits by way of taxes. I'll very quickly touch on the challenges. I think we're all aware that ESG, I think, is becoming an issue as we go about this project. And we're seeing, I think, some NGOs and some social sectors, some social groups, trying to sabotage the project. But we can confirm as a sector that we're working, we ensure that we protect the environment. And this we can demonstrate by working very closely with one conservation group called Umoja, with whom we partner, and across the country we conduct programs which ensure that we're compliant with protecting the environment. Finances are a trick when you're involved in such activities. So all that we'd like to do definitely will require financing. So we hope that we'll be able to get sufficient financing to be able to pull off all the all the activities that we've lined up. And then the last one is, as a sector, our capacity goes beyond the local capacity. We also tend to tap into external capacity, which has already been guaranteed. But for as long as we're not allowed to use that capacity, then it means that it stifles, the growth of the sector. So probably these are discussions that we'll be having as we go along. I would like to stop there for now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ronnie. I too have a question regarding balance sheet, just considering the sheer size of the project, but I'll save my question for the Q&A. Moving on to Veronica. Veronica, PwC has been one of the major companies in the advisory space for oil and gas, and I know you have a significant advisory business at PwC, and you've dealt with several clients over a number of years. So maybe talk us through some of the experiences you've had dealing with those clients in the advisory space, specifically in the oil and gas sector.
Thank you, Michael. So PwC has been advising clients within the oil and gas space, and one of the opportunities for Ugandan business relates to forming joint ventures between Ugandan companies and foreign entities, especially where goods and services which are required are not available by any company which is in Uganda right now. So that opportunity is key for Ugandan business. And if you looked at the presentation which was presented by Mr. Ernest, you realize that he mentioned that 16 joint ventures have registered right now, which is still quite low. If you look at the benefits of these joint ventures, one of them is knowledge transfer, especially where we have Ugandan businesses that don't have the technical capability to be able to perform those services and provide those goods. So what we've seen in the industry is that is key for development of skills within Uganda and transfer of knowledge within the industry. But one of the key challenges we've seen, especially for the upstream sector, where you have a partnership with a foreign entity, the Ugandan entity has to contribute capital, which is at least 48%. And the challenge is that most of the Ugandan businesses are basically SMEs, and they don't have the required capital to be able to participate in the sector. And you also see that even getting access to this financing may be a bit difficult because they don't have proper books of accounts for them to be able to meet the criteria to access finance. But maybe in terms of helping Ugandans, for the financial institution to be a bit flexible with them, for them to be able to access financing. In terms of bridging that gap, we've seen that most of the contracting requirements require a joint venture to be formed if foreign entities to provide services, which has helped, but it's just to continue encouraging joint venture, Ugandans especially, to be able to participate in the sector. The other key item is around creating value and linkage in other sectors. So what we've seen is around the tax incentives, which have been extended to Ugandans. And I'll talk about one key one, which is deemed VAT. So if you look at, we have a VAT incentive whereby VAT, which is charged by a tier 1 contractor to a licensee like Total and Sinok, is deemed to be paid. That's a key incentive, but the only challenge we have is that it's only available to tier 1. But we see that most of the local Ugandans are participating under tier 2 or tier 3 contractors. So the challenge is that these incentives need to be extended to tier 2 and tier 3 so that Ugandan companies are able to benefit, especially as some of this incentive, it helps with managing cash flow from a tax perspective.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Maybe just quickly, that tier 1 that you mentioned as it's defined in that regulation, is it for companies that have direct contracts with the anchors, the IOCs?
Yes, those are the main contractors.
Okay, that's noted. All right, thank you so much, Veronica Mawanda, Tax Manager, PwC Oil and Gas Department. I think for this part of the session, I will allow Tony to take it from here. Tony, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michael. It's quite interesting because the two sessions infuse into each other, which is, I think, a very good thing. And it makes the conversation very seamless. Now, I will go on to Mr. Agri Ashaba. Agri Ashaba, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, was a small boy. Now he is a big boy. And you can tell from the type of suit he's wearing. So Agri, first of all, congratulations. And I think it's a very interesting time for Ugandans, especially looking at the fact that you are going to do something quite humongous, not, seen before in this country. Something quite interesting. Now, you doing that brings in the aspects of preparation. How prepared are we as a country? Managing a camp is not the easiest thing, let alone managing a small hotel. And we've seen this as something that we struggle with. If you went to Hoima, you'll see that not all hotels are performing or doing things to the standard. How prepared are we when it comes to the food story? You are dealing with, or you're potentially going to deal with 4,000 people. How ready are you, or how ready is the country for this story?
Thank you, Tony. I'm not yet a big boy. We are just making a small contribution to the whole oil and gas story. Well, from where we sit as GCC services, we believe that what may look as challenges are actually opportunities for Ugandans to participate in the sector. And we, GCC and our clients, that is Total and McDermott, we are all aligned in what actually needs to be done to make sure that as many Ugandans as possible participate in this oil and gas story, especially from the supply of goods and services, the employment sector, training and development, succession planning. All these are areas that all of us as a tripartite are keen and aligned to make sure that we develop, and the impact for national content is deepened and widened. In regards to food as the biggest story, obviously, as Ugandans, we are usually used to picking from the farm or the market, buying whatever you want to buy and throw it in the saucepan, boil your food, and out you go, you eat, and you walk. And we are alive. We are 45, we are 50, we are 60 years old, and there's no problem. You have a stomach ache, you take a bit of medicine or Panadol, and you're still fine. Well, for oil and gas, it's a different story, because the type of standards that are needed for one to participate, or even the foodstuffs for those who we are willing to supply, is quite very stringent. However, the good thing is that it is not rocket science. The good thing is that it is not something that we cannot do. Yes, there will be a painful process, especially for small and medium enterprises, smallholder farmers, and everyone that is needed to be moved from where they are to a standard that will allow them to be able to enter the oil and gas story. But that gap, as GCC, we have a couple of people who are in country trying to support the process. We have also been engaging lengthy conversations with Total and McDermott to make sure that these gaps can be plugged and aligned and made available to the farmers, known, so that they can start to work on them. And probably in a period of about 9, 15, 16 months, a couple of them will be up and able to be able to supply. Obviously, it calls for a lot of resilience. It calls for a lot of enthusiasm and fortitude from the companies, but also to understand that the standards that we are looking for are largely ISO 22000, 2018, and also the HACCP process, which is the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. And these are areas of the food process that you need to control to make sure that either food doesn't go bad or becomes poisonous in the process that you're getting it from the farm to the fork. So from the way people grow the seedlings, the fertilizers, the planting, the harvesting, the storage, the transportation to wherever it's going to be collected, and obviously to where we shall receive it from, how we prepare it, and eventually how it gets served to the client, and even how it gets disposed. Because you don't want to have a waste management challenge. So these are processes which we believe that while they could be alien to many Ugandan companies, they are not rocket science, and if we work closely together, we can be able to overcome them. Obviously, the other challenge is on price and supply stability, and this is a challenge that we have as a country. We are not used to long-term contracts, which are locked in from day one and made sure that for the next 4 years, you can still be able to supply a service of a product at the same quality and at a consistent level. And knowing that most of our farmers largely depend on seasons to grow their products, depending on what they are growing, it's something that we need to look into and work closely, and not just as us as GCC or McDermott or Total, but the country at large, to be able to provide modern farming methods to allow people to consistently grow these products over the 12 months. Because if they are waiting for seasons, for example, now it's supposed to be a rainy season, but we don't see any rain. There's no matoke in the market, for example. So eventually the commodity prices began to shoot up, and then you have a challenge with price and supply stability. So those are some of the critical challenges. Obviously, the rest is on operational capital and capex, storage facilities, where people need, for example, if someone has produced 100 kilograms of tomatoes, if we are going to off-take maybe 50 kilograms of tomatoes, where do they put the rest of the 50 kilograms? So in the event that he can't be able to sell them over the next 2 days, what happens next? They are disposed of. So, and that means that the next planting cycle, he's probably short of cash to go into the season again, or he will abandon farming and go to a border. So these are some of the things that we are looking at, and we are looking at it as a holistic perspective, but we believe we can be able to cure them. Obviously, we can't be able to carry everyone. Along the way, a couple of people will drop off, but we are committed to meeting national content obligations, but it's also the correct thing to do, to make sure that as many Ugandans as possible participate in the sector.
Thank you very much, Agri. I could see Mr. Robert Gessi smiling. And we're going to come back to the issue of standards, because Mr. Othieno is going to tell us what they're doing to work on these standards or get us to the point where we are not providing poisonous food in these camps. But let's first go to Mr. Robert Gessi. You have done a project before, Self-Help Africa, you have supported, and we have seen your footprints everywhere as the Stanbic Business Incubator, because we are now supporting in the same area. Tell us what the story has been so far.
Thank you very much. I will give just a very brief presentation of the Agriculture Development Project program that we designed sometime in 2018 to respond to the challenges the challenges and opportunities of the oil and gas activities in the region. So in 2018, we were given an opportunity by the joint venture partners at Self-Help Africa to lead a consortium of NGOs that were, challenged to design a holistic agricultural development program to respond mainly to the opportunities, but also the challenges associated with the oil and gas sector. And the main issues around the design, we are looking at the influx of people to the area, but also the opportunities that are accruing out of that intervention. And the design took 4 critical strategic objectives. One around farmer-led organizational strengthening. The other one around forming farmers around enterprises, but also looking at how we can increase access to financial and non-financial services, business development services, especially by smallholder farmers. You can see my brother saying, some will drop along the way, but for us, the main focus is we want to give the smallholder farmers, resource-constrained, limited resources, have an opportunity to engage in these opportunities. And then the other strategic objective was really to bring them, bring out a voice in which they can influence policy around their opportunities. So the design 5-year target takes place and targets 40,300 farmers, initially in the 4 districts, but whose benefits would trickle down and reverberate to the 10 other districts in the region. And we also aimed to reach 42 micro enterprises, 49 SMEs, and 338 farm businesses. When we designed that, we were given an opportunity to harvest some quick wins. And we are very privileged to have intervened in the area. And so we've gotten some stakeholder analysis. We've done some value chain studies. We have a lot of information about the cassava value chain, how it operates. We've done rice, maize, horticulture, livestock, and fish. And we have data that relates to the profitability of some of these, of all these value chains. So any interested investor, any interested person from the business, from any area, private sector, can come and be able to access this information. We also chose 500 smallholder farmers, including horticulture farmers, and worked with the Changwari Dairy Farmers Cooperative, worked with the district local government of Hoima, and refurbished the pig abattoir, and expanded the business opportunities for selected 100 pig farmers. One of the things that I would like to mention is that we also did value chain analysis functionalities. We looked at the input supplies, we looked at the extension services, we looked at the farmer groups, we looked at the financial services provision in the area, we looked at the product quality, but also market access. And we were able to do a kind of an analysis of how these functions are operating. So if you want any investment or opportunities, this is information that is available that we can give you. I just wanted to mention that in the design, we looked at opportunities for investment, we looked at knowledge building, and we looked at strengthening smallholder farmer or led organizations in a bid to compete favorably and be able to supply the emerging food needs in the Albertine region. The challenges that we can highlight, and some of these have been highlighted by some of the previous speakers since morning, but which can be turned into opportunities for investment, are on-farm challenges, things related to post-harvest losses, things related to technology, things related to storage, things related to value addition. The smallholder farmers with their small land holdings need to be given the capacity to build their businesses as their agricultural enterprises as businesses, so that they are led into developing farmer associations that can operate as businesses. Of course, there is lack of financing opportunities. And this is a call to, Stanbic Bank. I am happy to learn about the incubation opportunities that they are bringing out. These are opportunities that these farmers, through their associations, can be able to benefit and participate actively in these opportunities. Technical advisory services, especially on business development, is a very, very, very strong constraint. Of course, product supply chains, they are inefficient because of the nature of the market and demand and supply forces. And of course, the technical know-how of how do we do marketing, the 4 Ps of marketing. And of course, the technology. We need investors in the different value chains. It's going to be a great opportunity for purchasing power because of the influx of markets that are going to, come up, paid workers in the oil and gas. The industrial baseline study in 2013 revealed 30,000 direct jobs and over 150,000 indirect jobs.
Robert, we are running out of time. If you could wrap up, please.
This is the last, yes.
Okay.
If you look at the strategic location, if you look at the high infrastructure developments that have happened, the latent demands of agricultural products, the population is estimated to double in the next 25 years. All these are opportunities that we would be able to harness and have our smallholder farmers actively participate in the opportunities occasioned by the oil and gas sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you very much for that precise presentation. Andrew, standards. Everyone has spoken about what can be. We've seen the challenges. But one critical thing is standards. Now, most Ugandans, you must appreciate as well, this is a new sector that they're interacting with. When you talk to most Ugandans and you ask them to get ready for oil and gas standards, they say, "Tubade tuchikola bulijo." What is different? And we'll appreciate that they've been in business for quite some time, and this seems to be seemingly different. Talk to us about standards.
Thank you, Tony. I seem to be the only regulator here, so I'm probably in for a number of questions at the end. But we seem to have our ducks all lined up, save for the embracement and understanding of standards. From where we are seated, it would appear probably only the licensees and maybe the tier ones really understand the importance of standards and have embraced the standards. When you go lower, then you have more and more of those who do not actually understand what it's all about. And so interactions like this are very important. Of course, we all know now that in the oil and gas sector, it is characterized by high quality, health, safety, environmental standard requirements. Now, UNBS, we have been mindful of what is going on in this area, and we have been working very closely with the regulator, that is PAO, but also UNOC, in order to look ahead and see what kind of standards would be needed to support this very, very big sector. As I speak today, as a country, we have just about 4,300 Uganda standards. About 1,000 of these are indigenous standards. Those are standards that are developed largely from scratch for Uganda. The bulk of them, more than 3,000, are internationally adopted standards. We have the option of either developing an indigenous standard or not reinventing the wheel, and therefore you go for the adoption of a standard that is already at the international level. Now, I just wanted to make something very clear that appeared to have an understanding somewhere. The notion that localizing standards means compromising on the quality should never be. You can have a local standard, its quality is not compromised. You can have an international standard and it would be equivalent to a local, or as Ernest advised us not to use the word local. In this instance, we can use a national standard. Now, to date, we have about 450 standards specific for the oil and gas sector, covering areas such as petroleum and petroleum products. This is mostly what we are going to get out of the crude oil, so we need to know what we have to make out of it, and there's a standard that provides the specification and the guidance on these. We have standards on drilling and drilling-related equipment. You need to bring equipment that is able to reach the depths that you require, but also in an environmentally friendly manner as such. We have standards on petroleum management, largely on occupational health and safety. We have standards on petroleum distribution, on petroleum transport and refining, but also on goods and services, where the likes of the GCCs fall, providing so much food and the rest. So that is, in summary, the story about standards. Standards is an ongoing process, development of standards. Unlike what most people may think, UNBS actually does not sit down to write the standards. We just facilitate the process. It's really stakeholders in the various areas of interest that actually are the ones who sit down and write the standards. As UNBS, we just facilitate to ensure that the due process is followed in respect of standards development. Maybe as I wind out, in the discussions that we've been holding with PAO and UNOC, I think what we have zeroed in on is the requirement for all the various project agreements to reference the use first of Uganda standards. Where they are not available, then we can reference the international standards, because we are a sovereign country and we have the national standards that must be adhered to. Of course, standards do many things. They ensure we are safe, health and safety-wise, but they do also support trade facilitation, those who are in production, those who are looking to supply goods. You realize that probably whoever is asking for those goods will require for you to demonstrate that those goods are actually safe. And you only do this through standards, through a process called certification. You get your products certified or you get your services certified, and with that certification, that is demonstration to whoever wants those services that what you're providing is safe. Challenges. I need to wind up with challenges. Standards, as I said, are developed by stakeholders. Getting these stakeholders interested to sit down to develop these standards is very difficult. They are always busy doing other things. That is one. Two is the turnaround time in developing these standards. On average, it takes about 8 months to develop a standard. Sometimes that is too long a time for us to wait for a standard. But we have administrative interventions to bridge that gap. Three, of course, is the knowledge and understanding about the standards. If you engaged MSMEs and did some kind of study, you'd probably be hard-pressed to get 65% who really understand standards. And so when my sister was talking about the project from the African Development Bank to support MSMEs, I was excited because I'm sure one of the gaps that will be identified there would be standards and certification, understanding that whole area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think that that preempts the questions, and I'm glad you stopped at the challenges. That preempts the question. So we're just going to go into a quick Q&A, and I'll allow my brother Michael to lead us on the quick Q&A, and then we can move into the next session.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. We can open it up to questions now. I would just ask that if you do ask a question, please state your name and the organization where you're from, and you can address your questions to any of these panelists. We'll try and respond to as many as we can in the time we have. Tony, I'm not sure how much time that is, but not much.
We'll do 12 minutes, 13 minutes for that.
All right. So, Marcus, you can help us actually point out the, maybe hands up, and then the microphone will be brought to you. We can do it that way.
Hello, thank you. My name is Joe Mangini. I work with GeoUp Solutions, and we supply PPE. My question is going to go to the last three panelists. That is Albert, I think, Robert, and the UNBS gentleman. I have a challenge about about the capacity improvement for people in Hoima. Let me just make a story about it just in a minute. Before, the Hoima people were digging and carrying out their farming properly. Now, when the oil and gas came, it came with money, bought these people's land, and the people ran away during the raps and everything. So when they bought the land, they sold the land, these guys got money, they bought borders, and they ran away. They started raiding borders. I know very many people there who bought borders. When a police catches him, drops that border and goes and picks another one. Here is the question. So, after they have sold the land, the people that came to buy the land are the ones that are doing the farming now. So the people that sold the land are back on borders. What are you doing to help those people off the borders and to improve their own capacities again? Question number 2 is going to go to the localization of local content. I feel like local content has been so much localized to Bunyoro region.
Can you be more specific and focused with your question? We have no time. Please.
Okay. The second question is about localization of local content. Yeah. I feel like local content has been so much localized into Bunyoro region. You find that areas outside Bunyoro, like Eastern region, personally I come from Busia, there is no one in Busia who knows anything about standards in local content, who knows anything about farming for oil and gas. What is being done about that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think starting with that last question seems like a question about sensitization, which maybe Betty, you can take. And then for your first question, I understood it as a challenge that many PAPs have in trying to get back to economic activity. So anyone can take that. Agri, Andrew, anyone who has any comment on PAPs and how we can get them back. Sof?
Thank you, Michael. That's a tricky one because I don't think any one of us here is involved in resettlement action plans. However, with all the good things that happen with any industry, there are obviously a couple of smaller challenges like those that will eventually outpour the many opportunities. But I think because their biggest asset has probably been sold off because of the start-stop nature of the oil and gas industry, they need probably now to be engaged to reinvest whatever it is that they received into acquisition of another asset in terms of land, and they get back into the project. And it's not only them, many other people have left the oil and gas businesses because of the long delay that happened between probably 2011 and now. And it's not only peculiar to the people of Bunyoro. I also know people in Kampala who have closed offices and turned into other businesses. It's basically part of the game, and probably we'll have another session on resilience and see what needs to be done to approach, to provide solutions to that.
Okay, Robert first, then Andrew.
Thank you very much. I think at Safe Africa, we have some experiences doing resilience programming, and that's a case of how these borders, even in their border type of vocation, they can engage actively. For example, we've done value chain functionality analysis, and even with that border, can they be led into organizations managed by themselves such that they are able to create a critical mass where they can probably engage in input supply, where they can engage in value addition or processing. For example, we have experiences where, like say cassava processing, a border puts a processing machine on his border and runs around the village, processing a bag of cassava into high-quality cassava flour for 1,000 shillings. That is organizing them to be able to engage in meaningful activities on any of the identified value chains. The key point is let them get organized, help them to get organized in farmer-led or just themselves leading their own organizations into strong, powerful, and very strong. They can go to, Equity Bank, they get a small loan. We can organize them into savings with a productive purpose. And they can own some of these, and be able to provide some of these services. The idea is to create opportunities where everybody can be able to participate actively. And by active, we mean being able to meaningfully earn a decent living in any of the ventures that they will be involved in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I tend to align with most of what has been said, but maybe I'll just tweak it a little, because in other jurisdictions that are a little well-to-do financially, which hopefully we are getting there, we can probably look at putting aside some of the money from the oil fund, not for loans, like he says, because they'll never pay the loan, but for grants that are specifically targeted towards reskilling and adult learning for these guys. Of course, they have to be organized, they have to be identified, but the idea is that you reskill them, you give them opportunities for adult learning. It has worked in other countries where industries have shut down, but people look elsewhere for other living.
Thank you so much. I think, Tony, a lot of that question also has to do with financial literacy, interventions that you're directly making with the incubator.
Definitely. I mean, that is an ongoing process, and it's also very interesting to train someone who has never held money on how to save money. So the first thing, of course, is to show them how to make money and then help them on doing that. But I think financial literacy is an ongoing process. I mean, even the big boys still undergo through a lot of difficulties, but it's something that we constantly do, and it's something that we are willing to take further. And I think in the conversations around agriculture, that has also become one very critical area, and we intend to do it, especially with this program that we're pushing or supporting Petroleum Authority with along the pipeline districts. But for now, allow me to ask Betty to answer that question in regard to nationalizing this story.
Thank you. Thank you, Jorap Solutions. The question is on localization of local content. Local content has been localized. The people from other regions are not participating, especially Eastern region. Well, what I can say is that Mr. Rubondo this morning gave us a slide on the value that has been retained in the country. And he gave us, for the period 2017 to 2020, $171 million US retained in this economy as a result of the services. But I can tell you that only less than 10% has gone to the companies that are within the Albertine Graben, meaning the focus is everywhere. I don't have statistics for the Eastern region, but the focus is on everyone. There is some bit of affirmative action for the Albertine Graben for very clear reasons, especially in terms of getting the basic skills, but also the supply of available goods and services. But the focus, the approach is for everyone, everywhere. So when you get the information, irrespective of where you come from, get yourself prepared, get on the national supplier database. There is no limitation to which region you come from. Then the other one that I thought I need to talk about is on the person who left the border and then went here and went there. I think the discussion we talked about on linkages of the oil and gas sector to other sectors of the economy is trying to address that problem. We do not expect the farmers in the Albertine Graben to run away from farming to providing for oil and gas. Our expectation is that we need to work together with the agriculture sector to get them vibrant enough to produce enough for the over 1 million people that will come to the Albertine Graben. So the same analogy goes for the rest of the sectors. We do not expect the transporters to run away and come to these other sectors of the economy. So that is something that we are looking at seriously in terms of linkages, and please encourage whoever wants to live where they are to join the oil and gas. Oil and gas is also going to support other sectors become more vibrant, like tourism sector, through the many experts that will be coming here, the many visitors that have a good appreciation of tourism amenities. So we need to look at the economy comprehensively and let us talk to all these people to ensure that they remain where they are. Oil and gas will need the transporters, will need the farmers, will need the environment specialists, so we don't have to all run to the oil and gas sector. At least will crowd out the economy and have negative impacts like we've had in other countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Betty. And one last question just before we leave the stage. This is a question that has come from a gentleman who has been promoting the conversations of this oil and gas story, especially the pipeline story between the two countries, Uganda and Tanzania. And this is Ambassador Kabonero. His question is there any harmonization with the standards in Uganda with those of Tanzania to make sure that our contractors can easily operate in the two countries with easy mobility, because it's a transboundary story and standards, if anything, have to also be seen in such a way? I think this goes to you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you very much. Brief and straight answer. Yes, there's a lot of harmonization work on standards going on in the EAC, not only Uganda and Tanzania. We are working as a bloc, and of course we're happy to have the DRC on board now. So far we probably have upwards of 1,500 East African standards harmonized across the board. I can't give you the figure yet for those specific to petroleum and that sector, but probably upwards of 250. So yes, it's ongoing work, and it's a process we have a good handle on.
Fantastic. Over to you, Michael, as we can close, or as we close.
Yeah. I think only thing that's left, Tony, is to thank these panelists. Thank you so much for giving us a very wide perspective on challenges, experiences, and opportunities happening in the sector today. I think a lot of lessons have been shared, but I thank you so much, and thanks the audience for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for those very insightful words. We are getting to the tail end of today's sessions, and we have one last panel and two presentations before we call it a wrap, so we should be out of here as planned. Before we do that, I have two quick announcements. I do know that we are in the Holy Week. The Easter weekend is upon us, and if you are feeling generous, and by generous I don't mean financially, but with your blood, one of the longest serving companies in this country, Multilines International, as part of its CSI, celebrating 20 years of business in the country, is doing a blood drive right at the bottom here at the entrance. If this is your way of giving back this Easter season, whether it's because it's Easter or because it's what you do, you give blood, please feel free to join them in the blood drive at the bottom. Now, I would like to call a gentleman who is an accountant, a bank executive, and has been for a very long time. In 2002, he was appointed the executive director of Finca Uganda, which is a microfinance deposit-taking institution. position he held till 2010. He was then appointed to the Managing Director and Chief Executive of Centenary Bank, where he served until Jan of 2015, and I think he still serves today. He is a Rotary member of Chiwatule, and he is also a Paul Harris Fellow. I need to ask him what that means. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the Chief Executive and Managing Director of Centenary Bank, Mr. Fabian Kasi, to give his remarks. Sorry. Should I use this here? Just press play there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and I bring you greetings from Centenary Bank. My presentation today is okay, how do we have it on? Well, can somebody support? Okay. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. As I said, I bring you greetings from Centenary Bank. Thank you again for this conference. Us at Centenary Bank, we are grateful to be part of this. The presentation today is about what we are doing as a bank with regarding to promoting local content. And I'll tell you that Centenary Bank in this country is one of the biggest local content banking services institution, if not the biggest. And I'll quickly take you through the story of how this has been attained. What we have is an outline of the presentation. I'll quickly go through, and possibly at the end there will be questions. But I'll just, give a highlight of what the bank does over time for the last 30 years, and basically and specifically the interventions for local content, because it is the purpose of this presentation. That is basically the history, saying that we started in 1983, so operating in 1985, basically a development bank, rural. It is still Centenary Rural Development Bank, because some people sometimes have asked whether we've changed when they hear it is Centenary Bank. It is a Centenary Rural Development Bank, a bank that was founded to develop enterprises, especially those in the rural areas. The next slide just goes to show the composition of the ownership. As you can see, this is a bank that was founded by the Catholic Church in Uganda, being owned by the 19 Catholic dioceses in this country, including the Catholic Secretariat, owning about 70%. So it is truly a local content institution. But of course, we had to also have partners from out of the country, from France and Netherlands, who came and partnered with the local owners to be able to drive the agenda of the bank. And the agenda, as far as the vision is concerned, providing financial services, focusing on microfinance, but the mission being to provide financial services which are appropriate, especially microfinance, to all people, and particularly those in the rural areas, in a sustainable manner, and of course in accordance with the law. That summarizes the raison d'etre, or the mission, the being there of the institution. These are basically values that form the pillars on which our operations run. A couple of them, as you can see, professionalism, leadership, and so on. But I quickly run to the next slide. I think I've skipped one. Should be able to go back. No. Currently serving close to 2.5 million customers in this country. And of course, as you know, Uganda is one of the countries where not many people are dealing with banks. We have 25 commercial banks dealing or serving about 80 million customers, of whom 2.5 are being served by this bank. Through its branch network, the biggest currently standing at 81, and close to 190 ATMs, automated teller machines. Agent banking is one of the key delivery channels that has been introduced lately. Currently, the bank operating over 5,000 locations. The bank has also used digital platforms to be able to deliver services to the people, to Ugandans, using phones, mobile banking platform, cards, Visa cards, and MasterCards. I'm sure those of you who have operated, you've seen them. Currently doing 1.2 million cards in this country, as opposed to the 2.5 million account cards that are being operated in this country. So we can see the effort and the thrust that this bank is doing as far as those various channels of distribution are concerned. When we are talking about the balance sheet value, currently running at close to 5 trillion Uganda shillings, second biggest, having moved in that trajectory. When we talk about, next slide is to do with liabilities, deposits that have been mobilized from the 2.5 million accounts that I talked about, close to 3.5 trillion, which is a market share of about 13% as far as the industry is concerned. Loans that have been extended, over 2 trillion Uganda shillings, again a share of about 13% as far as the whole industry is concerned. Profitability, the bank has been posting profits, as you can see in that graph. By the end of June last year, 122 billion. By the end of this year, over 200 billion. Again, projecting the level of sustainability that a financial institution need to have if it is continue serving customers in the country. Of course, all this is meant to show where we've been, the kind of preparation, the kind of service that the institution does, and when it comes to oil and gas, the level of effort, the level of sustainability that the bank will be able to offer. And this slide goes ahead to explain how the bank is contributing to local content. And this one revolves along 4 pillars of financial inclusion. First one is accessibility. As you can see, the bank has given accessibility. If we go to the Albertine region, accessibility in terms of branch network, in terms of agents, we have 316 bank agents in the Albertine region. You recall that we have over 5,000 in the country and still growing. We are in position to also use a mobile banking van to reach where we are not physically, where the branches are not or where the agents are not. But also, customers can use their phones through the banking platform to be able to access services. The ATMs, we've already talked about the 190 that we have, and also internet or online banking are some of channels that have been availed to deliver services to our customers. So that is accessibility, again, ensuring that SMEs or enterprises that are operating in this region are able to access financial services. The second pillar of financial access or financial inclusion is usability of services.
we've been able to ensure that we design products that speak to the needs of the customers. We can say that we've so far facilitated opening of accounts that are being compensated along the pipeline through the 10 districts. And so far we've been able to facilitate almost 3,500 customers that in that area. And of course, we are going into another phase where we'll be having many more open accounts and being able to access services. But as they open accounts, they don't stop there because they need to understand how to use financial services. Financial literacy is one of the key things that we deliver to these people, and continuing to make them understand how to better use the funds that have been given to them as compensation. Okay, of course, sensitizing them, financial literacy, I've already spoken to those ones as some of the things that we do. And on top of customizing solutions, and we will continue, of course, as we get to understand the needs of these customers, and it is a continuous exercise. The third pillar is affordability of financial inclusion. We try to ensure that these services are delivered at affordable prices when it comes to fees, when it comes to interest rates. And of course, when we talk about affordability, it doesn't mean the cheapest. We are talking about, given the kind of services that are being delivered, what kind of value is being given by these services, and therefore what can be paid vis-a-vis what the market can offer. And this is a thing that, a tenet that we try to focus on. And sustainability of services is very critical. We've looked at where the bank has been. We've seen how it has been strengthening itself as far as profitability, balance sheet is concerned. But also, we do all this using partnerships as well. And we'll be looking forward. We've already started identifying those institutions that we can partner with to be able to deliver services, because we believe through partnerships, we will be able to offer sustainable services. So we also, as we do the provision of services, we want to ensure that the environment is protected. Green financing is one of the key things that we do. We've financed people to be able to use renewable energy, as you can see in those pictures, as some of the things that underpin our mission, and we hope that doing all this will be protecting the environment. But also, as we do all this, we've looked at the bottom line, the profits that are being made. But as we do that, we aim at ensuring that there is also better social performance of the customers that deal with us, with this institution. I thank you very much, and I believe maybe at a later stage there will be questions which I will be able to answer. I know I'm here with some of my colleagues. Benon is seated there, and a few others, and we have a booth. If there are any other questions, we can always answer them as they come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasi. Like he said, their booth is upstairs at the exhibition hall. Please feel free to walk up to the team and ask any questions that you might seem necessary to be answered. Now, we shall enter into our final session for today. And the session is about the focus on mapping a way forward on maximizing national content, especially in the upcoming subcontracting phase. And like Mr. Rubondo said earlier on in the afternoon, and Andrew reiterated it here, we shall try as very much as possible to refrain from using the word local content and change it to national content or community content. Because in Uganda, the word local is really not a nice... When they tell you are local in Uganda, it's not a praise. Yeah, that one is too local. So, for all our sakes, and this is especially to our international community, local is not a plus. In Uganda, it's a minus, a huge one. So let's use national content while referring to this, or community content. So I'm going to ask my co-MC, Ms. Pamela Natamba to please come, because this will be her session, and she will introduce her panelists as the final session for the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, as I introduce the next session and the panelists, I'm going to request the panelists to come up. Pamela from Total Energies, Brian from Kasidie, Biarohangan Company Advocates, Mr. Derek Natumanya, Maurice, Victoria, Nick, if you could just come up as I introduce Pamela, who's going to take us through a short presentation before we then get into a panel discussion. So as they come up, the first speaker is going to be Ms. Pamela Alinda Edimu, who is the Contracts and Procurement Manager at Total Energies Uganda, and she is responsible for ensuring that there is inclusion and maximization of national content participation in the Tilenga project activities. To date, I see an estimated 139 Uganda suppliers engaged in representing a combined value of $297 million US. So that is big. The lady here is the one you should ask any questions around the Tilenga project. She's worked in the legal and supply chain management space in the oil and gas sector for 12 years. So she has 12 years experience, including international experience in Paris, working very closely with the rest of the Total team in the contracting processes for the FEED, the RAP, enabling infrastructure, early works contracts, and so on. Pamela, you're most welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. All protocol observed. Invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be part of this conference. And I'm a bit nervous, but actually excited to speak to you all regarding an area that I'm passionate about, but also I know is a huge contributor to what we are talking about today, which is maximizing national content and seeing how to retain that value out of what we have achieved. I spend lots of hours together with Rosette brainstorming how to actualize this and take it out of the academic field. What I've been asked to do is to share with you experience having run lots of procurements on what typical challenges we have observed from different parties participating in our procurement process, and give you practical tips on how best to engage better with not just Total Energies, but generally the oil and gas licenses. So I'll start by I'll borrow what I've actually listened to. So just to set the scene, when it comes to procurement, you notice that so many contracts have been awarded. I won't go over all the statistics because this has been shared by previous speakers, especially our regulator, the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. What I want to emphasize is that as Total Energies, I think even before the national content was, I would say, legislated, it was a passion, and this is seen through our processes, to ensure that we engage Ugandan firms that are qualified to support our work in Uganda. Why? One, we know that we have a social responsibility to make sure that we don't just develop oil fields, but we have an impactful change. But also, too, in fairness, it is cheaper and more logical to use farms at our own ground than to look for foreign entities that will have huge markups. So all this is to say that in sharing these tips, it's not academic. We are very interested to see as much as possible participation of Ugandan farms in what? In providing goods and services, in engaging with us to improve on our initiatives that are skilling Ugandans through capacity building programs. So that said, I'll now get into, because I have only 15 minutes. Just move. Uh-oh. Perfect. So what I'm projecting here is what I pick up. And by no means, I'm not looking to be exhaustive. I'm not looking to be prescriptive in how you run your companies. It's just to give you a flavor, to trigger thought, and probably have some improvement. I pick up a question that was asked some time back. Are the activities in oil and gas focused within the oil and gas region? No, because I can tell you when we are running the procurement process, we do not inquire which region you're from, not at all. We're actually looking to see whether you can deliver what we are looking for. So I'll start off. Typically, we have seen that most of the submissions we receive are inadequate or insufficient, and I'll qualify that. What does that mean? Missing information. So normally what we do, we structure our needs in what we call instructions, and then ask you to address those needs in writing. Most of the submissions sometimes we receive are missing most of the information we have asked for, or they're answering to something totally different. So we take it maybe that you were in a hurry and you had to kind of beat the deadline. Or worst of it all, we have experienced this where someone submits a bid to Total Energies but meant to send it to CNOC, something like that. So at this point, we are our hands are tied up as to what to do. Sometimes we will clarify in as much as possible, but I can tell you this in a way has impacted participation of farms. And I won't say just Ugandan farms, but on the whole. I'm sorry, I can't see. It's a bit far. Sorry, I'm just going to open this on my phone because I can't see that far. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say here, typical challenges is if you could, in putting together your bid preparations, we actually read them. So if you could take the time to put together comprehensive bids. Now, we normally have the instructions quite clearly laid out, but if you don't understand them, do not hesitate to engage. So that brings me to the next point. We have noticed that there's a lack of proactive engagement by bidders during the process. When we send out the instructions, and we do this using online platforms to ease access, we do not hear from any of the bidders most times until the submission time. I want to demystify that. The more you engage us, the most likely you'll understand the scopes much faster. We have contacts in most of our bid documentation in email or telephone contacts. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. I want to emphasize that quite a bit, because oftentimes we note that there is a lack of engagement due to a perceived fear that I don't quite get. So I would really encourage you to do that, because it will help us to quickly also pick up if the documentation is not properly worded. The next one is really to also emphasize then, once you even engage, we have noted that there is a missing link between how you understand the scopes and how you go ahead to structure the methodology of how you're going to get the work done and all the other aspects of the tender. We understand that most of the farms here are very technically driven. So in terms of, I suppose, bid preparation, you focus more on understanding the technical aspects, but unfortunately miss out the heart of Total Energies, which is national content. So we know that you're good at what you do, but we want to understand, okay, how are you going to get it done in line with our objectives as we set them out in the bids, with aspects like national content, community inclusion. That actually is the X factor most times in the bids. We are driven towards bids that are technically qualified and have taken the time to demonstrate how they are going to participate within the communities that they're going to work? Do you have drives, for example, to recruit casual laborers from the communities that you're going to work in, or are you going to pick them up from the headquarters of your companies? Do you have any capacity building initiatives you would think of that could, whilst you're performing the service, also benefit the community that you're going to be working in? That really is normally the X factor when, for example, you have comparable bids. We are driven to move more towards awarding such companies because they are driving the conversation not just for now, but also for the future. So now regarding contraction and compliance, I highlight this for purposes of improvement tips. We have noted that for whatever reason, preparation of participating in most of the procurement commences when the bid is launched. So I wanted to just share with you typically what delays most bidders, one, to participate, but even when they do, to remain competitive. Our bids have a section between understanding the technical aspects, having a look at the safety, social, biodiversity, and health aspects that relate to the scope. After that, how do you understand the maximization of national content in performing the scope? And lastly, how have you priced all that? Contractually, this is what we look at. In fact, it never changes from one bid to the other. So you can imagine if you prepared your company to have this on hand, that when you receive a bid, you already have a folder that you just pick, drop, and make a few tweaks to fit what is being asked. You've already covered almost 10 to 15% of the bid. We noted that timely, for example, timely filing of tax returns is a problem. Complying with social security requirements is a problem, but as Total Energies, it's imperative that these are addressed, one, for compliance, two, we are very big on working conditions. So if you can address some of the aspects that I'm projecting right now, you'd actually have your technical bid locked in. I'll touch a little bit on the National the National Supplier Development Database. It's important that you don't just get your company registered, but keep that valid. In other words, keep in touch with the regulator to make sure that you have updated information, and at the same time, the registration is current. I lastly touch on the point of joint ventures. This was spoken to by the Executive Director of the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. Joint ventures is one of the key areas we are really encouraging most of the bidders through our workshops, through one-on-ones, to look into. Now, there is a misconception sometimes that joint ventures are merely to capacity build local companies with foreign entities that would like to come into this market. Actually, joint ventures is, for me, one of the vehicles that is going to maximize national content. Why? Because the industry we're working in is very risky, it's high-end in terms of value. So even with a company that has been working in the industry for a while, you will need that boost. So having joint ventures and thinking about who would be the best person to work with might go a long way to actually get you onto bidder lists much faster. So now I've been touching on the improvement tips as I went along, but maybe what I haven't touched on is a bid management team. I know it looks obvious, but we have seen this being the biggest problem. What do I mean? Most of the participants that submit bids, you can tell that one person sat down and tried their best to understand what is required and try to put together a bid document that's competitive. I don't think that's the best business way to do it. The truth is, if you had a dedicated team that understands how to put together bids, that coordinates, you'd be able to put together a competitive bid on time. That's an improvement tip I would suggest. I've seen some people do it, and we have some success stories around it, and they're much more structured, and specialization also helps to keep up the quality. Well, the next tip is quite obvious. I share it to demystify the fact that we always go for the lowest bid. Not necessarily, because we have other considerations. As I mentioned, National content is one of those. If we have 2 bidders in the running for an award, and one of them has a higher national content, and the price difference between the 2 bids is 5%, we'll go with the one with a higher national content scope and plan and commitments. So in other words, when you are pricing, you need to keep in mind the profit margin that you're going to top up on your bid, 1, should be well thought out, but 2, should be clearly sectioned for us to see how you've apportioned your costs across board. Oftentimes, the misconception that the lowest bid is what will be taken drives poorly developed bids, which unfortunately we cannot award. I will not read out everything because it's all written out. But what I want to close off, because this is something dear to us as Total Energies, is that the maximization of national content is a joint effort. In order for us to include as many players as possible, we need you to, 1, have a look at all the bids that we advertise, and we do this systematically in all the media that we have. Please respect the timelines, because we are trying to run something that is transparent but also fair across board. And then when you do participate, please read the documentation. If you're stuck, you know, our offices are on Coast View Towers, Yusuf Le Road. Come to the 5th floor and say, look, I don't understand your English, break it down for me. We have a whole team around that. And lastly, when you do get the opportunity to submit the bid, keep note that every aspect in our bids is important. It's not only about price. National content is equally important, and we are driven to see that actualized in what we do. So I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Pamela, my namesake. I guess those were very useful points for us. And my key takeaway is let's engage. When Total sends out a tender request, it's not a death sentence. Let's go and speak to them and find out exactly what they want us to submit, and they are available to support us. So we are turning to the panel, and I would like to introduce the members on the panel. We have Mr. Brian Kisita, who is a senior associate at Kasidie Biarahanga and Company Advocates, and he will be representing the lawyers as he speaks to us around the legal and regulatory framework and how sufficient that is for purposes of promoting value retention. We have, Brian, you can wave so that we know who you are. We have Mr. Derek Natumanya. Derek is the COO for ICS Engineering and Environment Limited. I'm going to read your bios in brief without going into detail, given we don't have much time, but ICS is working closely with Ruli on the pipeline project. So they have experience from that perspective, and he will be sharing his experience from practical perspective of joint ventures and partnerships. We have Mr. Morris Amogola. Mr. Morris Amogola is the CEO for Minet Uganda, a Pan-African firm specializing in insurance and risk management, as well as human capital solutions. Minet has been with the chamber for a long time, since we started this oil journey and since they started operating here in Uganda, and he'll be speaking to the insurance requirements and whether those are fit for purpose with where we are in development of our national content as well as value retention. The 4th panelist, we have a lady on the panel, Ms. Victoria Kayemba. She's the current sector head for oil and gas at Stanbic Bank Uganda. Victoria has over 15 years working experience with various institutions, including Ernst & Young, Standard Chartered Bank, and now at Stanbic Bank. She will be giving us a perspective from the banking side of things. The earlier panel mentioned that there is challenges around financing and our local players being able to access finance and prepare themselves to participate in joint ventures. So she will be talking about the financing perspectives and how they can support our local service providers. And then on the panel still we have Mr. Nick Tuma, who is currently the Human Resource Manager for East and Southern Africa for Schlumberger. And Schlumberger has been here through the exploration phase. They're here with us in the development phase. They're actually doing some work on the Tilenga project. So they will talk about capacity in country and how we can support specialized services, locals in specialized services such as drilling, well completions, and the like.
Smart 24, driving business.
God. Zizinga, wait. Yeah? Ka selfie.
Wow. Do you have the MyGo TV app? Oh, do you use star 206 hash? Labono. Bwe life techina kunyumira. With the MyGo TV app or star 206 hash, you can make payments, you can change package, you can fix errors, you can check your balance anytime, anywhere.
Download the MyGo TV app from Google Play Store or the App Store or dial star 206 hash.
Ha! My phone!
Go TV Uganda. Love it.
This is Jordan. When it comes to classwork, Jordan is magic. Jordan shines. Jordan makes his peers better. Jordan is a true leader. White Star Magic family. Be a leader. Be magic.
Sasulira akasimu k'ekirooto kyo mpola mpola. Funa essimu y'ekirooto kyo leero ng'osasula mpola mpola okutandikira ku nnusu 1400 n'ofuna data ow'obwereere okumala omwaka. Essimu zonna kugirako MBs 5 buli lunaku okumala emyezi 12. Osasulira omwaka gumu. Ziri mu maduuka ga MTN n'aga M-Kopa.
We go through life hustling, doing different jobs to make ends meet. No matter how strong you are, age will eventually catch up with you. Your hope of a comfortable retirement is saving for old age while you still have energy to work. Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority, the regulator of all licensed retirement benefit schemes, UBRA, encourages you to choose from any of the licensed schemes and start saving, whether employed or self-employed, to avoid regret during your old age. For more information, call 0417-304-500. This message is brought to you by Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority.
Packages, great entertainment,
Sports, the local content, telenovela, the movies.
There is something for everybody.
Go TV, this is where the stories live.
Get the best entertainment for any budget. With GoTV, you will have great entertainment for as little as 13,000 Ugandan shillings per month. GoTV, great stories, Zidiwano. GoTV Uganda, love it.
Smart 24, driving business.
the advantages that accrue with the international partnerships are almost clear. Because ideally, when you end up working with an international partnership, it rubs off the way you work, and I won't focus on that. Working with Wally, working with Total on the same system, you must change your value chain to make sure you match their standard, and that so far has been the biggest advantage that we've had as ICS, that you work with Wally and you're working on the same platform. It means if you're talking about your IT systems, they have to be aligned. If you're talking about your internal security, so the entire value chain has had to be changed to match those international standards. And for us, we believe as ICS, that will never leave us the same again. And we believe that the value we are gaining from oil and gas, the standard levels we are coming to, participating in oil and gas, we will now move it to other sectors, like transportation sector, where we've been very strong. And we believe that will bring value stronger. Now, coming to the other big advantage of technical capacity still in the local perspective, you have, looking at the technical capabilities, joining two companies, if, for example, you're bidding for a project that has environment and engineering, one company is stronger in environment and is stronger in engineering, definitely you've addressed that challenge. So local partnerships address these three major issues and major challenges that we mentioned at the start. And from our perspective, this has been very successful. When one is strong, the other one is weak at any time. So, when one is weak, the other one is stronger. So the partnerships have brought the synergies in all the three areas I mentioned above. Coming to what can be done better, of course, emphasizing the points that have already been made around partnerships. One is increased awareness and understanding that this cake, this bread that's before us as a country, I think the PAU ED put it in great perspective that we are getting contracts of a size that we've never seen here. So it's big enough for all of us. And the awareness for minds of Ugandan companies to appreciate that joint ventures is the way to go. No one will eat the cake alone and finish it. The awareness and such discussions to encourage these companies to be open to working and partnering with competitors to be able to push now this better. And we will be stronger in that way. So the awareness should be increased. The next point may be around the discipline for the players that are participating, especially around prudent financial management. Because as local firms, and we must thank the banking, the financial sectors and all, there has been majorly a positive force around financing and all other factors. So have access to this finance, and just by presenting a contract, you'll have access to finance because banks are willing to give this money. So we would encourage all these companies that will be involved in these joint ventures that they need to be prudent in financial management and disciplined, not to abuse the kind of grace that is being extended by these banks. Then the other point would be around clear partnership
maybe Derek,
agreements.
I'll pause you there so that I can come back to you shortly after I have posed the question to Stanbic on the financing side now that you're going to that aspect. But ladies and gentlemen, the point that I would like to make is the panelists, you realize the panelists have been specially selected so that we can learn from people that have experiences and are putting into implementation the things that we're talking about. Pamela earlier was talking about some of the things that they're facing in the bidding process, the challenges that they have seen. We've talked about partnerships since morning. So for those of us that are struggling with some of those aspects, partnerships, different aspects that we've talked about this morning, just mark the faces and have the conversations. The importance of being here today is to make sure that we are maximizing the information, but also the contacts that we get out of here. So I like what Derek has been sharing in terms of what they are doing as ICS, and let's engage. So I'll ask a question to you, Victoria, from the banking side perspective. because earlier, I think it was Veronica who talked about the fact that locals are struggling with financing as well as packaging themselves to look appealing to the banks. From a Stanbic Bank perspective, and probably from a wider perspective of financial institutions, how are banks positioning themselves to support the local service providers with financing, considering that we all want to participate, we want those partnerships, but we are struggling to get the financing? Can you tell us how we can de-risk ourselves as subcontractors and local service providers?
Much, Pamela, for that question. Obviously, it is a very challenging question, given that the different people in the room have experienced, have different experiences with the different banks. But before I answer that question, I'll just paint for you the picture of how a traditional bank thinks. In the mind, what goes on in the mind of a traditional banker when a contractor or a subcontractor approaches them for financing. So traditionally, a bank will think about the 5 C's of credit. Does this client have the capacity to repay the loan? And that is, are the cash flows positive? Do they have sufficient revenues? Do they have enough capacity in terms of servicing whatever contract they have? The banker will think through what their secondary source of repayment will be. Does the client have collateral to back up in case this contract fails? Is there a backup and for the bank to fall back to? The character of the borrower, what is your credit history like as an individual, as a company, your willingness to pay, what is said of your management style out there in the market? And then capital. In the banks, we love to call it, what skin do you have in the game? What are you putting down as your own contribution for this contract or for this job that you have won? Then lastly, the conditions. Do the conditions favor you? How is the contract? Is it favoring you? Have you negotiated properly, and will you get value out of it? So given what's happening, especially in the oil and gas industry, the traditional banking thinking has been challenged greatly, and especially the fact that the national content is protected. You find that it's a requirement for every contract to have some national content. So you find that the companies that are winning these contracts do not really tick the boxes of how a traditional banker thinks. For example, you find that someone is winning a contract that is 20 times more what they've been able to do before. They do not have, the capacity. When you look at them, maybe they've had 5 trucks before, and the contract is asking for 50 trucks. Then the high standards that the employers look out for, you find that the contractor or the subcontractor has a very small balance sheet that cannot, if you start analyzing using financial metrics in a bank, you cannot even add 1 more shilling to that person. So we've found ourselves facing this kind of thing, and we've had to ask ourselves, how differently can we support the clients in this sector? How can we think outside the box? Because if someone just has their house that is probably valued at 300 million, and the contract is $5 million, how are you going to get that collateralized? So as banks, we've had to start reasoning differently and seeing how best can we support. And also the other thing that I want to bring out is many times the employers give out a contract that is asking for a performance guarantee. Remember, I have just described to you the kind of company. It's a small company, but the employer has, trusted them with this huge contract and has requested for a performance guarantee from the bank. Now the question is, how do the banks satisfy themselves about the performance of this contract? Because the guarantee is going to be called once the contractor does not perform. and that means the whole risk now lies on the bank. So the banks have to find a way of satisfying themselves or seeing how this performance risk is mitigated. So because of the high perceived risk to financial institutions due to the nature of the national content players that are coming through, they've had to face challenges around high cost of financing and some resistance from the banks in terms of lending them. So I'll then talk about what are some of the things that the banks, how have the banks positioned themselves, or what are the banks thinking through in supporting these contractors. First of all, as banks, we have to understand the challenges faced by these companies, the nature of them, and then see how to rely on the contracts and be able to structure facilities following the contracting cycle and making sure that we follow through each step of the way. For example, if because the contracting cycle it goes all the way from bidding to award of the contract to contract execution and to completion of the contract. So the banks have had to find ways of making sure they give bite-sized facilities in line with the project milestones of the different companies. I'll give you an example. If a company has a contract to, let's say, provide transportation services, the first bit would be to mobilize trucks to be able that they are on site to be ready for the work. So then the bank has to think through, how do I, because the contract can be $20 million, but it has several milestones. So how do you break it down to make sure that you're not overly exposed, and that at each point you're servicing and supporting the client. So you can help the client mobilize up to a certain point in time, and thereafter give short-term financing based on the cash flow cycle, and also rely on the anchors, the employers, for the repayment. Many times we would love, and if this was possible, to work together with the bigger contract employers, because these are people that are trusted. So how do we work together to make sure that we monitor together these contracts, getting of progress reports, and ensuring that at the end of the day everyone wins? Because if we are to think traditionally, then it will become very difficult to support the local content.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks, Victoria. And I'll turn to Slumbergel now. Nick, I know one of the aspects that Mr. Rubondo talked about earlier was the fact that they're starting to see local companies and individuals play from the inner circle, moving away from the indirect services to the direct service type of work. From your experience working in those technical aspects of the oil and gas sector, is there capacity in country to support such specialized services like drilling, well completions? And as Slumbergel, is there anything that you have done to build capacity and transfer technology in that space?
Thank you very much, Pamela, for the question. So when it comes to respond to your question on whether there's capacity in country, I would say there is a lot of potential in country for people to get into the specialized services. And the reason I say that is since we had the FID signed on February 1st, I've been on a few calls with Ugandan business owners and their joint venture partners or strategic partners from other countries, Nigeria, Pakistan, who are looking at being subcontract for us for some of the services that we're offering with the Tilenga package. So I would say to piggyback on what the ED of PAU said is we as the Ugandans, we need to be ready to do the joint ventures and to partner with some of these people who have the technical capabilities and probably also the financing muscle that is needed to make these strategic partnerships go ahead. To your question on whether what Slumbergel is doing in Uganda to develop these strategic partnerships, the number one thing that we always look at is whether it makes sense for the business. And right now, since we're still in the mobilization stage, we're still thinking around that. However, we have made a lot of strategic partnerships in Nigeria, and we have a lot of joint ventures with companies that we work with in Nigeria. Some do maintenance for us, drilling, different sorts of services, and we are looking to doing the same in Uganda. And what we will be doing later on going on would be holding supplier dialogues where we can share with the Ugandan community where the opportunities could be. And if there are those who have partnerships already with companies from abroad, we can still engage with them, have conversations, tell them what the scope of our work is now and where the possible potential is for them to join hands with us. Just further to add to that, on one of the other things that we're also doing on developing local capacity is local hiring. And this is underlined by 3 main items. The first one is we hire where we work. So we are hiring a lot of Ugandans, fresh from the universities and also experienced professionals that we are bringing in. We are very serious and focused on developing the national content in Uganda. The other thing is we have a robust training and development program, which we take everyone through, which is complemented by what we call borderless careers. So we are hiring Ugandans here from Uganda. We're sending them to Angola, Mozambique to train. And once they've completed that phase of the training, we'll bring them back and plug them into the project. So that's what we are doing with regard to capacity building. And when it comes to technology transfer, we are working with Makerere University, which is something we started in 2011, but we're looking to now expanding it to other institutions where we share with them some of our licenses for software such as Petrel that they can use and prepare for their working life going forward.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And it's comforting to hear that there's steps being taken to ensure that we are not staying in the outer circle, but we are getting into the inner circle as well. The earlier panel spoke about insurance and touched on certain aspects of insurance, some of the challenges that we are seeing. Maurice, from an industry perspective, do you think our current insurance requirements are fit for purpose? And what has been your experience so far? I know you haven't probably had a lot of insurance going in the development phase, but you can draw from prior experience and current experience on what you have seen so far.
Thank you, Pamela, for that question, and good evening, delegates. Insurance is a very, very vital aspect of society, and any investment or any person strategically will need some form of insurance to be able to protect himself or herself from risks that we live among. In Uganda, insurance is still a growing sector. Sector has been growing at about 11% per annum, which is one of the fastest growing sectors, but from a very low base. There was mention from one of the moderators about capacity. We are coming from a very low capacity in terms of market. Our companies are not large in comparison to other companies that operate internationally. And that's why national content was a very important aspect. We will need to build this capacity. We will definitely, through the Uganda Insurance Consortium, retain part of that risk. But the risk that is being retained locally is quite small in the value of the risk that we are looking at within the oil and gas. But the point here is that we will start small and grow. The aspect of insurance, of course, is always spreading the risk. So whereas we have the Uganda Insurance Consortium taking part of the risk, the other part of the risk will be reinsured in the international market. So with all of you who have quite sizable contracts, There will be mention of other companies like Munich Re. You will hear of Swiss Re. You will hear of many other reinsurance companies that will be part and parcel of your risk, but they will be in the background rather than the foreground. But they will share, they will lead in terms of making sure that the risk has been properly modeled, the terms and conditions have been thought through, and the discussions with your insurance brokers, because Minet is an insurance broker, and Minet, before it became Minet, was Aon, and there are many other subsidiary insurance brokers operating here in Uganda who also have an international flavor, and they are able to sit with you and do risk management on your risk and help you to understand the risk, understand aspects of how you mitigate, and after you mitigate, of course, then insure as required by the contract terms. Only then would you be able to be comfortable the risk is insured. But because of the high values and because of the long tail of building capacity through capitalization, the retention from a local perspective will still be small. But having said that, there are other components of the risk that will be ably covered by the local insurance companies. Risks like workmen's compensation, risks like group life insurance, risks like medical insurance, risks like cyber insurance. All are these risks that all you as entities would have to think through with your insurance broker, understand the magnitude of the risk you carry, and put in mechanisms to manage, and thereafter transfer these to an insurance company. But the important thing is, through the National Content Forum, we will also start small, but we will grow as we enhance the oil and gas industry in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maurice. And now I turn to the last panelist before I open it to any questions that the rest of the members here might have. Brian, having said all that is said in terms of the expectations we have of the contractors that are participating in the sector, expectations from a financing perspective, insurance, is the existing legal and regulatory framework sufficient to promote value retention in your perspective? And maybe you can speak to this drawing from some of the experiences as well that you have had interacting with your clients.
Yes, thank you, Pamela, for your question. First and foremost, we do not have enough data that this legal framework is sufficient at the moment. We'll have to give it time to assess the legal framework regarding national content. However, we draw from experiences and lessons from other oil and gas producing countries where there have been success stories. Some of the success stories have come from Nigeria and Angola, and I would like to go through what Uganda has done that has followed the path that Nigeria and Ghana have set for us, that will ensure that our legal and regulatory framework in the oil and gas industry is sufficient. Firstly, Uganda enacted a specific national content laws, which is very vital if you're going to ensure that national content and value retention is sufficient. In enacting the specific legal framework, some of the aspects that have been key in national content frameworks have been three aspects. One of them is promotion of local employment, promotion of skills development and technology transfer, promotion of national industry participation, and these three aspects are embedded in our national content laws. And on looking at lessons from other oil-producing countries, in order to ensure that these three aspects are realized, successfully realized, they have followed three main principles. One of them is being the degree to which local content is embedded in sector-specific policies and legislation. The second being the degree to which the local content framework includes local content thresholds. And the third being the degree to which local content framework includes monitoring and implementation mechanisms. So in promoting local employment, skills development, and technology transfer, as well as national industry participation, these three principles have to be followed. I'll give examples in the national content law that shows that actually these three principles have been followed in Uganda's national content law. For instance, you will see that when it comes to local employment, the national content law talks about Ugandan companies and defines them being companies that are employing 70% of Ugandans, which is a clear indicator that we are promoting local employment. As you can see, it's embedded in the law, and the thresholds are also there. It also talks about labor clauses. This is why I talk about labor clauses, that if every contract, a contract of above $1 million US should have a labor clause that states that they will hire a minimum percentage of Ugandans. Though the percentage is not stated, at least it goes a long way in showing that our national content law is talking about promotion of local employment. Thirdly, another example you will see is in our national content law, it talks about, especially in the upstream content law, it talks about hiring of Ugandans, that at the start of petroleum activities, in the category of support and middle-level staff, that percentage has been 95%. That's quite a big number. If you're telling all companies at the start of petroleum at the start of petroleum activities, your support and middle-level staff has to be 95%. That's a clear indicator that Uganda is at the forefront of promoting local employment. When it goes to technology transfer and skills development, they have made it. It has been clearly stated out in the national content laws that if a company or if a licensee or contractor has been approved, they have to submit what they call a detailed plan, training and recruitment plan. In the training and recruitment plan, they have to show how they are going to engage in skilling and training of Ugandans. And this plan has to be approved by PAU. So in that instance also, Uganda is on the right track. When it comes to national, when it also comes to national industry participation, you see that previous speakers have spoken about ring fencing of certain sectors in the economy. That's a clear indication that national industry participation is a big factor in our national content laws.
Okay.
Also, lastly, before I conclude, just to drive the point home, if you look at our, especially I'm focusing more on the upstream local content framework, you see that in both the midstream and upstream local content legal framework, they talk about all licensees and contractors submitting annual national content performance reports. These reports have to be submitted every year for review by PAU. In those reports, they have to state out the following: the employment achievements in terms of hours or days worked by Ugandan citizens and foreign workers and their status. It also has to set out the Ugandan citizens trained and employed, indicating particulars by name, job, and level of training and employment. It also has to set out the procurement achievements in terms of quality of locally manufactured materials and materials of foreign origin. Then it has to state the names of Ugandan companies, Ugandan citizens, and registered entities contracted, the contracts awarded, the value of each contract awarded, and duration of the contract. And lastly, the report has to show technology transfer initiatives, research and development programs, and any training programs by the licensee. So in this, as I conclude, I'll say the national content legal framework is sufficient. We may have to wait for some years to assess the data, but as it stands, we are following the path set by Nigeria, which has been a success story in Africa. Thank you, Pamela.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. I think I agree from the many aspects that you have covered that we have a robust framework that we are working with. I guess the test will be in the monitoring and implementation of that framework to ensure that we realize its intended objective. I want to believe we have some questions here, starting from our initial presenter, Pamela, who spoke to the bidding process at Total, and the rest of the panelists this afternoon. I hope we have microphones moving around. Let me just have your hands up if you have any questions, and I'll take about 3 questions before we can wrap this up. So there's a gentleman in pink, there's one in the middle in a black jacket and blue shirt. And then if there's one more hand, we'll take that and we'll close.
Yes, thank you. I'm Kevin Wanyama from New Plan Limited. My question is related to Veronica from PwC, who was the panelist earlier, about the stringent conditions by the banks directed towards the local companies when they try to access funding. For example, well-audited books of accounts, which many a small company in Uganda surely does not have. What are the banks doing to lessen some of these conditions so that the local companies in Uganda can be able to access this much-needed financing and also partake in this big cake? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the second question.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Elvis Ejemai with Radial Circle Engineering Services.
Can you speak up, please?
Good evening. My name is Elvis Ejemai. I'm with Radial Circle Engineering Services. My question is to Pamela. While she was presenting, she talked about being active in the National Supplier Database as one of the challenges she's having. My question is, how do we go about that? How do we get to be active? How do we go through that process? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elvis. And the gentleman in the middle there.
Thank you very much. My name is Mukobe Isaac from Spacious Projects. My question goes to Pamela regarding the bidding process. Many speakers have spoken about the issue of joint ventures, but I would want to know from Pamela, in most bidding processes, every party in a bidding process is evaluated using the same conditions set out, just like a single contractor would be applying in terms of technical capacity, financial capacity. Now, in this situation here where we have a joint venture with a different company, are we both supposed to be evaluated based on your set out criteria, or you're going to take it in terms of percentages, local content and the content going to the international companies, assuming my joint venture partner is an international company? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. I will request Victoria to respond to the question from New Plan. I didn't get the name, around what the banks are doing, and then Pamela, you can take on the last 2 questions.
Thank you so much for that question. One thing we need to understand is that the banks have to look at your business and how you're running your business. Now, one of the things, whether you have a contract or not, is that you must have a business with proper financials. Now, we've not reached as we are not yet saying how big is your revenue or how strong is your balance sheet. But even as a small business, you have to have the financial discipline to have your books in order, to have them audited. It may not be by the largest audit firms, but how are the banks going to get that comfort that you're actually running your business and you will be able to execute on this contract? They are relying on you to drive your business, to be in charge. So they will ask for things like financials, which have to be in order. They will ask for things like your CRB report to look at your credit history. And they are trying to gauge and see, can I take this risk? Even if there is a strong contract in place, but never mind that the employer is actually saying, the bank, please take the risk. So the bank has things that really they have to look at as minimum requirements. And some of those are financials. They don't have to be the strongest of them, but at least let them be properly audited and properly kept. So in conclusion, what I'm saying is that the banks will look at the business, the underlying business, even without the contract. How have you been running it? What is the management profile like? And what is your history of performance? And I think those are things that have to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Pamela.
Okay, I'll start with the first question. So the question was, how do you get your entity registered to the National Supplier Database? So if you visit the website for the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, you'll find all the requirements listed on the website, which you should have a read and then submit the application. It's an online application, and it's as simple as that. So typically, I don't want to enumerate them and miss something. I want to encourage you to go and have a look so that you have an exhaustive knowledge of what's required. But typically, they'll be asking who you are, so your articles and memorandum of association as a company. Could you share your tax position, so your latest tax returns? They'll be asking to know your contacts, your offices, where you are, and the range of services you're going to provide. Once you provide all this information, the authority will have a read, review, get back to you if they have any questions. If the whole application is fully constituted, they will acknowledge by giving you a reference number and then get back to you informing you that your entity is registered. You can as well go online. There is a register that you can check to see that your entity is registered. The validity of the registration is normally 3 years, renewable. So it's upon you as an entity to be diligent to make sure that you update your company details, but also when it's expired, you reach out to the Petroleum Authority of Uganda to renew that. The second question was related to the JVs. The question, if I get it right, let me know if I've not rightfully paraphrased it. Basically, you want to know if you're a joint venture between a foreign entity and a Ugandan, how you evaluated as a JV in a bidding process. Am I right?
Says yes.
Oh, okay. Is that it? Okay, perfect. So the first step is when you approach us as a JV, we want to have some sort of document to help us understand your marriage, which comes in the form of a consortium agreement, or name it a memorandum of understanding, or you can approach a lawyer to help you with that. We want to see that, to understand how are you going to relate, who is going to do what, who is taking lead. Remember, the genesis of joint ventures is also regulated. So in other words, we expect that you're coming together to strengthen something. So we want to know what that is. Is it technical? Is it financial? Is it, I don't know. So you need to articulate that in the document. That will be a starting point to start evaluating the joint venture against the scope that has been tendered. Most times, the consortium agreement will be structured around the scope of requirements that has been issued to the public. Once we get an understanding of how you want to work together, then we will evaluate you as a joint venture, obviously looking at each individual company in the joint venture to see the strength and then to see the areas you are intending to work together and whether it delivers what we are expecting. So when we ask, for example, for an execution plan, we don't expect 2 execution plans if you're 2 entities and a JV. No. It's 1 execution plan because we expect you to be working together. However, there are certain aspects that you might want to submit individually as entities because it's a legal requirement. For example, are you compliant in terms of tax remission? We expect the tax returns for both entities, unless you're an incorporated joint venture that has 1 set of tax returns. If not the case, we'd expect to see certain documentation each of the entities has to submit for purposes of us appreciating that you are compliant. So, tax returns, NSSF remissions, etc., as I listed them. For the other aspects where you came together to work together, we expect 1 set of documents that we shall evaluate. On the national content aspect, I'll close off with that. What we expect when you come together is, how are you maximizing this, which is the theme of what we're talking about. You have a foreign entity and a Ugandan entity coming together. Perfect. So how does it look in terms of technology transfer? Is there anything that's going to be transferred from one entity to the other? Is there any capacity building initiative that you're setting up, having come together? We want to see the value proposition. So in fact, more than ever, when you're a joint venture, we really want to see that. So yes, your national content plan would be, it's a joint exercise that you need to develop as together and presented as 1 plan. I hope I've addressed your questions. But if you need more information, we can talk after this. You can as well come over to our offices and we can dig deeper into that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pamela. I'm afraid we have to end it here. Luckily, I didn't see any other hands going up, so I believe we have addressed all the questions. But also, when I was being initiated into this role of hosting events, I was told that you have to pay attention to your audience or to read your audience. So I can clearly tell that we are tired and we need to take a break or end the day here. I would like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying on until this time. I know it's been a very action-packed day, but I believe it's been for a good cause because the information that we have received here, the interaction that we have had was truly, truly, truly needed. It's perfect timing for us. We'll continue these conversations tomorrow. We have an equally packed program for the day. If you will have a look at your programs, we will be starting or resuming at 9 a.m. in the morning. So I'd like to request that you're here in time so that we can listen to our Tier 1 contractors. We're going to be having McDermott, Sinopec speaking to us. We're going to be having different teams from Woolly, ICS again, and a number of others that will then bring it down to experiences at the Tier 1 contractor level, engaging with subcontractors or Tier 2, Tier 3 contractors. And in fact, we're going to have breakout sessions tomorrow that are going to be in the different halls that will be communicated to you. And in these sessions, we're going to have these different Tier 1 contractors breaking down specific aspects of their own expectations. How do you win and optimize opportunities at Tier 3 level? So there's going to be many interesting things that we're going to listen to tomorrow. Thank you so much to our panelists this afternoon again, and please do feel free to speak to them, run after them as they head out, catch them at the coffee area. Make sure that any questions that have not been addressed here are addressed there. And a big round of applause once again to our sponsors, Stanbic, UNOC, Total, CNOC, Equity, the Oil and Gas, the Insurance Association, and many others, as you have seen them over there. We do appreciate. One last announcement. There's a cocktail, but it's only for the sponsors and partners in Katonga Hall. If you'd like to interact, share a little bit more about what was happening today and future opportunities, please take advantage of that. And this has been sponsored by the people that I've just mentioned, Stanbic, Total, CNOC, UNOC, and Equity. So thank you so much once again. Have a lovely evening and see you tomorrow morning.